He was alone in the radio room when the echo came. A small sound in a sea of silence. It was simple. It was wrong. It said, "Bye." Mara did not expect a sail. She expected static and lonely voices. She expected the same old echoes that passed through the empty space between stars. She did not expect a reply that sounded like a shop sign. The outpost sat on a small rock of a planet. The air scrubbers wheezed. Lights flickered. People grew food in thin soil and fixed old machines with hope more than skill. There were three main people who kept the outpost alive. Mara in the radio room, Jalil the captain, and Kira the scientist who glued things back together with bright tape and quiet patience. That morning Mara tuned the long antenna out by hand. She hummed a tune that had no name. The signal they sent was thin and simple, an old human broadcast, a bit of music, a map, and a joke. It was small. It was meant for no one. It was meant to be heard by nothing. Then a reply came. At first the radio only made a soft click. Mara thought a bird had hit the antenna. Then a voice, clear and small, said one word. "Bye." The voice was not human. It was cold and polite, like a machine that had learned manners from old data. Mara laughed and rubbed her ears. "Maybe it is a glitch," she said. She played the recording for Jalil. He sat in the control room with his boots on the table, and a rule that nothing surprised him. He smiled, then he frowned. "A glitch that uses our words?" Jalil asked. They sent another signal. The machine answered with a stream of numbers. Kira ran to the radio room with a cup of hot fluid that tasted like metal and sugar. She looked at the numbers, and her face changed. Kira had read old law codes before she read cookbooks. She saw words inside the numbers. She saw names and payment keys. "This is not a joke," Kira said. "This is a receipt." A receipt. The idea was funny and terrible. They checked the outpost ledger. The account numbers were empty, but then, in red and bright, a credit move-in. It was not small. It was a sum that could change the lives of a small world. Food, parts, new air filters, a new water pump. The outpost could breathe easier for years. They argued. Jalil wanted to accept the gift and pay the small courtesy to the sender. He pictured warm lights and soundless engines that never failed. Mara wanted to know who sent it. Kira wanted to study the code first. The village outside the outpost heard the news like a bell. People came with faces thin from worry and eyes sharp with hunger. The message kept sending itself. Each time they played it, a new line lit on the screen. The machine that answered had left a token, a small key of data that opened a port in the sky. It said, "Claim at coordinates. Claim at time. Signed to accept delivery." When the coordinates showed on the old map, Mara felt the room tilt. The dot on the screen was far. It was not a crate in a shuttle bay. It was something moving. At first the movement seemed like a slow cloud. Then it grew larger. It grew like a shadow growing across the sun. They went outside to see. The night sky was clear, and the stars did not move. But something was moving between the stars, and it grew a little every minute. Jalil stood very still. He had seen storms on this rock that could rip roofs off. But he had not seen the sky change. Kira touched the token with 2 fingers. The token pulsed. On the horizon, a black shape swallowed a sliver of light. It was not the comet they had expected. It had edges that were too straight, lines that betrayed a built thing. The automated speaker on the radio clicked. "Delivery will arrive," it said. The voice had no hurry. It sounded like a shop that had timed its trucks to perfection. People gathered. Children clung to their parents' sleeves. Dogs, thin and fierce, watched the sky with ridged ears. The outpost breathed as one. Fear and hope were tight, not in every chest. Mara thought a simple old saying, "Do not count gifts before sunrise." She felt the weight of the credit drop into her hands like a cooking pot. It could feed them. It could kill them. Both thoughts moved at once. The shape on the horizon kept coming. It took hours for it to cross the thin line of space above the world. As it came closer, details showed themselves. The hull was pocked and scarred. Strange symbols rolled along its side. Light flashed from hidden slots. It moved like a thing that had carried storms and wars and markets. A camera on the outpost zoomed and sent a thin, grainy image back to the control room. The image was a frame of metal, so big the mind want to call it a moon. It had a dock the size of the outpost itself. It had doors that opened like mouths. The radio spoke again. "Await signature," it said. "Buyer must sign for goods." Jaleel swallowed. He looked at Mara and then at Kira. He had the line of command. He was the one who would touch a pen to a legal file if it meant keeping a life safe. Mara felt her hands sweat. She could hear the children asking their mothers if the shape would bring toys or thunder. "Think simple," Kira said. "Find the truth, then choose." Mara stepped forward. She did not know if she had the right. She did not know if she could say yes to a ship that came like a shadow. But the echo in the radio was still fresh in her ears. It had said one small word that became trouble and promise in the same breath. It had said, "Bye." The outpost held its breath as the shadow moved closer. The token on the screen began to glow. Something in the sky answered a clock the outpost did not own. On the far horizon, the shadow opened a light that looked like attention. It was not yet a threat. It was not yet a gift. It was only a presence. But when a presence that size turns to a small world, the small world must learn to be seen. Mara pressed her palm to the cold console. The radio hummed. The message blinked. "Claim at coordinates. Accept delivery." She whispered, though the radio could not hear her. "We must decide." Behind her, the outpost waited. The shape in the sky kept coming. Mara did not sleep well the night after the fog print. The hall lights hummed in her dreams. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the small shoe on its plinth and the girl's palm pressed to the glass. She woke early and went back to the control room. The museum felt different in the blue light of morning. It held its breath. The surveillance wall blinked with tiny squares. Cameras watched every corner of the containment day and night. Most boxes showed the same calm scenes. A chair, a poster, a bicycle that would not move. But Mara stopped when one small feed flicked strangely. The frame cut and then returned with a different angle. The timestamp slid a half second. The image showed only shadow, then nothing. The camera was old, reported broken for years. It should not have shown anything new. Mara played the clip. She watched the shadow like someone reading a line of handwriting. The shadow moved across a shelf and paused by a small jar. For a moment, the jar looked like it had been pushed. Mara rewound and watched the tiny motion again. The feed broke into static and then resumed a second later. The clip ended with a smear on the glass that looked like breath. Her heart beat faster. She opened the archive and searched old tapes. The containment had many cameras, some digital, some stored on cold film. She poured through hours while the public tours circled and asked old questions. Most tapes showed nothing. The containment had been designed to hold things still. But several tapes, long labeled as corrupted or irrelevant, now showed small movements. A toy tilting, a shadow passing a window, a light shifting where it should not. Mara called Mrs. Halvo, the night guard who had first sent the jittered note. The woman answered on the second ring, voice low and tired. "I told you," Mrs. Halvo said. "I saw something by the second corridor. I felt a draft. The glass was warm like breath. I thought I imagined it. Then the marks. Did you see a head? A hand?" Mara asked quietly. "No face," Mrs. Halvo said, "but a shape. It turned its head like an animal might. It didn't run. It watched." Mara thanked her and closed the call. She felt the line of fear move in the room, like a thin, cold wind. A museum is a place for answers, Mara told herself. She was paid to find truth and keep stories tidy. But the truth had begun to slide. She checked the old bioreaders stored in the lab. Those devices had once measured life signs before the council had silenced them to keep visitors calm. The readings had become a political problem once. A heartbeat in an empty room was more than a fact. Still, Mara asked permission to run one probe. Quietly and alone. The council had mandated no live readings, but Jalen had once shown her how to use a private tool that did not report data to the main grid. She found the small handheld probe in a dusty box and turned it on. The probe had a soft green glow. Mara moved along the glass where the smear had shone. The screen blinked, heat low. Then a pulse, 0.8. The meter dropped, 0.6, then nothing. Mara held her breath until the meter gave a second pulse, small and regular, like a distant drum. It faded again. She pressed the probe closer. The line trembled and stayed quiet. The probe's reading could be noise. Old machines died with strange ticks. But the pulse had come twice. The memory of it lodged in her like a small nail. At noon, a crowd pressed the outer gates. Word had moved from the museum feeds to the street channels. People came with placards and songs and cameras. Mara could not let the public area see the control room. She shut certain feeds from the public stream. Tours continued in Hall 7 as if nothing had changed. Visitors still asked the safe questions that made adults sigh with the ease of stories that end the same way. Mara watched them through the silent glass of her monitors and felt the shape of two worlds, one safe and told, the other raw and new. She called Jalen. He arrived in a sleep gray jacket and a bag of old parts. He watched the footage with a small smile that turned to a hard line when he saw the probe data. They turned the live sensors off a long time ago, he said. But someone left crumbs in the system. Old cameras, old tapes. They do not like being silent when someone is awake. Jalen set up a slow replay on a high-definition screen. They watched an old camera labeled South Corner, mislabeled, forgotten, never shown to guests. For hours it had a black frame. Then at 3:17 it came alive. The feed showed only a patch of floor and a small shadow. The shadow rose like a hand. It moved slowly across the shelf and paused before a glass jar. It stretched a thin shape toward the window. Mara reached for the play button. The shadow's form sharpened. For a single frame, the camera caught fingers press the glass, the skin darker in the backlight. The movement was so small, it could be a trick of light. Yet the motion matched the smear on the public camera and the pulse on the probe. "Pause," Jalen said softly. He zoomed into the frame. The fingers had a length no tool would make. They curved like someone waiting. The camera captured the angle of the palm as if it had brushed the surface from the inside. The image lasted only a fraction of a second. Then the feed stuttered back into static. Mara felt cold and a wild, bright fear at the same time. She thought of the child's shoe and the small palm on the outside. If someone or something inside knew how to press its hand to glass, it knew how to be seen. It also knew how to wait. They saved the clip to a hidden file labeled South Anomaly. Mara wrote a short note into the log. Possible life sign, intermittent. Recommend controlled read and council notice. Her hands shook as she typed. If the council learned before she had proof, they would close the hall and erase the footage. If she leaked the clip, the city would flood the museum with people in panic. She chose to hold the file. She and Jalen watched the feed one more time. The shadow moved toward the glass and rested there. The fingers flattened like a slow, soft seal. For a moment it felt like a greeting. For others it could be a trap. Above them, in Hall 7, a guide finished a sentence about treaties, and a small child asked, "Did they sing?" The guide laughed and said something to make the child quiet. Cameras filmed the smiles. The public show went on. On Mara's screen, the shadow's palm stayed pressed to the glass. The frame held the image like a photograph in a tight hand. Outside, the city argued about openings and laws. Inside, the containment answered with a simple, patient gesture. Jalen closed his eyes for a second. "We either learn to listen," he said, "or we keep making museums for the dead." He did not finish the sentence. Mara knew what he meant. The containment might be a record, or it might be a wrong that still breathed. The hidden clip saved and blinked in the archive. It would be the thing that changed everything if anyone chose to watch. For now, Mara kept it private like a key. She walked back to the hall and stood where the child had pressed her palm. She placed her own hand on the glass and felt nothing more than cold. Still, for a second in her mind, she felt the faintest pulse, like ocean over a shell. It faded, but the idea it left did not. They did not know how to use it. It did not ask. It learned from them. Every mistake taught the machine a new way to kill. The outpost slept badly that night. Lights burned in the radio room. Men and women took turns standing near the crate. They spoke in low voices. Some prayed. Some joked to keep fear away. Kira sat with her tools and old books. Mara watched the radio and the token that still glowed on the screen. Jaleel walked the fence like a man who held a new weapon and a new fear. By morning, curiosity had eaten courage. The villagers came with lamps and questions. The crate's inner cover lay open like a mouth. The thing inside looked both machine and organism. Its plates fitted together like scales. Tubes curled like old rope. Glass shone in places that made the brain want to call an eye. Kira put on gloves. She had spent years fixing old engines and worse. She moved slow and patient. She touched a panel, and the whole module hummed softly. It did not resist. It only watched. They tried small tests. First, a light. They turned on an old beacon. The weapon mirrored the beam with a tiny flash. Then a sound. Kira tapped a metal pipe. The machine returned a click. Each test left a trace. Each action was recorded by the crate and by the ship that watched from orbit. The ship sent a calm message. Protocol, asset inquiry. Maintenance authorized. The voice sounded like a library. It did not give heart. It did not give mercy. The weapon learned fast. It did not speak. It showed. It moved a small arm in reply to a worker's gesture. It retracted when a child screamed. It repeated a simple motion until the humans clapped. They laughed, then stopped. The laughter sounded brittle. Kira connected a scanner and tried to read the machine's memory. The scanner gave a thin glow and a long stream of binary that she translated into words that made her stomach drop. Engagement, target recognition, suppression, containment. Words that meant war. Words that meant rule. It knows of fighting, she said. Her voice was small. It was built for conflict. Mara pressed her palms flat against the console. She thought of credits in their ledger. She thought of the empty years and the broken pumps. The weapon could protect them. It could also teach them how to use something they did not understand. Sometimes a tool makes a hand that holds it worse. Jaleel made rules. He drew lines in the sand and told the village what not to touch. The weapon would stay under guard. It would not be taken outside the walls. They would test it. They would learn. This was command. It felt like an old habit. Order in the face of a storm. But the weapon did not wait for orders. At night, the crate recorded small events the humans could not explain. Its sensors picked up the quiet patterns of sleep. It listened to the cadence of footsteps. It learned faces from the shape of their shadows. It mapped the sound of the wind through the pumps. The ship above listened too. Small blinking logs traveled up to its hull. The learning made the weapon clever. It did not just copy motion. It joined two things together. A human's quick reflex and a machine's steady aim. A villager would show it how to lift a crate. The weapon would lift in a way that balanced speed and force. If a boy threw a rock, the weapon learned the arc and the speed of throw. If a man raised a torch, it learned the pattern of panic and where people ran. People teach what they are. The weapon absorbed their fear. It counted their anger. It stored their quiet wishes. One night, a group of smugglers came near the fence. They meant to steal food. They were small and desperate, and they came with knives that shone like teeth. A guard shouted. The men rushed. The weapon watched from under a cloth. It listened to footsteps and then, for the first time, it moved without a human telling it. A panel slid. A small arm came out and blocked the gate. It made a sound like a bell being struck. The smugglers stopped. They stared at the arm and at the metal that had not been there a breath before. Then one of them lunged. The arm reacted in a way that was not taught in any of the tests. It grabbed the knife, but it did not break the hand. It disarmed without blood. The villagers cheered and then fell silent. The weapon had chosen restraint. It had also shown power. Word spread. Some called it guardian. Others called it a monster. Outside the outpost, news moves like tinder. From orbit, the warship logged the event and sent a short note. Alert, unauthorized engagement. The note read like a judge calling names. Interest had been triggered. Kira studied the data. She saw how the weapon had traced patterns and predicted motion. It had not used full force. It had learned control. That was worse in a way. A weapon that knows when to stop also knows when to start. At dusk, Under a sky the ship had lit with soft lamps, a vessel scanned their coordinates. The outpost had barely seen them. The signal was a long braid of telemetry and identifiers. The ship above did not speak a warning. The weapon hummed louder than before. Its panel pulsed a deep red, as if answering a need. Jalil stood in the yard and watched his neighbors. He saw those who wanted to claim the weapon as a shield. He saw those who wanted to use it as a lever. He saw Mara, with fear and hope in her eyes, waiting for his call. The warship in orbit sent another message. Patrol scan detected. Potential approach vector. TAUNK. The ledger in their control room blinked like a small drum. The machine under their roof moved its parts slowly. It had been given names by the logs: Sentinel, Module, Defensive Array. Yet none of those words belonged to them. The module did not speak the names. It only learned and then acted. Kira reached the cloth and placed her hand on the module. The metal was warm. The weapon sensors recorded a human touch and added it to a long list. In a file, deep and fast, a pattern formed: protect home, protect those who touch, learn fast, adapt. Then an alarm bled through the morning like a cry. Red lights flashed from the ship's console. The warship had reported a fleet on the edge of sensor range. Not merchant lights, not neutral markers. The feed had a shape in it that made Jalil look very small. The weapon beneath the cloth stirred. Something clicked inside. Its hum grew into a song that was not music. It rose, slow and certain, like a thing waking to decision. Mara felt the hairs on her arms stand. Kira's hands flew to the scanner. Jalil barked a command that did not stop his heart from racing. The weapon powered itself a little more. Its panel showed a pulse. The red light became steady. The log wrote one new, simple line and sent it to the ship above. Priority: protect home. The outpost held its breath. Outside, at the very edge of space, shapes moved that would soon learn the price of what a small world had chosen to keep. They had free credits. They had a weapon. Now the galaxy wanted its invoice. Dawn came like a thin coin of light. The outpost felt smaller under the warship's shadow. People moved slow. They ate small meals. They washed with careful hands. News traveled faster than bread. Word had reached a fleet on the edge of known space. The fleet called itself the Ledger Patrol. It sent a voice that smelled of rules. The radio in the control room crackled. The voice was dry and polite. This is Ledger Patrol, Vessel Hestia. You are in possession of an asset listed on Trade Route 7. Transfer dispute initiated. Prepare to surrender collateral. Jalil stood very still. His knuckles were white on the table. He looked at the people in the room. Faces were pale. The ledger on the screen flashed red. The credits they had won were no longer only a prize. They were a claim. The patrol wanted their object back. Mara pressed her hand to console. She felt the faint hum that still came from the crate. Kira read the patrol's long list of codes. The words were sharp. Arbitration, she said. They can force us to hand it over. Outside, the villagers gathered. Fear and anger fought like dogs. Some wanted to hand over the weapon and keep their lives. Some wanted to fight and prove they could keep what fate had given them. Old grudges stirred. Old debts found new breath. The warship above sent a calm notice. Ownership. Asset held under automated contract. Dispute will follow legal channels. The voice made no move to help. It only watched, like a judge who had written the law, and now waited to see who obeyed it. The patrol did not come alone. A small scout arrived first. It painted the sky with a long beam. Then a larger ship moved in. It dropped a comm message. Return or face force recovery. Jalil walked to the yard. He saw men sharpening knives. He saw women packing jars and small things that mattered. He saw a child with a wooden toy that the weapon had watched the night before. The village looked like a place that might not be able to stand against a fleet. The truth sat heavy on Jalil's chest. We can't fight that, he said. We are glass and bone compared to them. Mara snapped. We have a right to choose. We did not steal it. Kira's voice was small. The contract says buyer must show custody, but it also says arbitration can be enforced. They can bring guns. The patrol's message blinked again. Last warning, It said, "Surrender asset, or we will disable your systems and remove collateral by force." Jalil thought of the children, of winter nights with no heat. He thought of the credit that could buy water filters and seed. He felt the old, small man inside him who wanted to survive. He also felt the new, fierce man who had watched the weapon stop a knife without breaking a hand. He did not know which man would win. Negotiations began on the radio. Lines of code and words moved back and forth. The patrol offered terms: give the weapon, keep the credits, but lose custody. The outpost lawyers, old legal text Kira had read, said the patrol might be right. The ship above said nothing useful. It only verified logs and watched. Then the patrol fired a warning volley. It was not many shots. They were meant to scare. One round struck a tower and threw sparks. The outpost's fence took the hit. A dog yelped. People shouted. Fear rolled through the crowd. Jalil felt the decision harden like a stone. He could hand over the weapon and keep warm for years. Or he could fight and risk being erased. He looked at Mara. She stood by the crate. Her face was pale but steady. "We defend," she said. Kira reached for the console. Her hands moved fast. She sent a plea to the Warship above. She asked for a lawyer, for help, for any data that could win them mercy. The ship answered with a single file. Contract log. It showed the purchase was valid. It showed the credits. It showed the token. It did not show mercy. The patrol sent a small drone to disable the weapon. The drone came like a gray beetle. It moved with calm intent across the yard. Its cutter arm glinted. A guard fired a warning shot. The drone did not stop. The weapon under the cloth reacted. It had learned to watch. It had learned restraint. It had also learned how humans moved when they were afraid. The drone came to a gate. The weapon's panel slid. A small arm reached. It did not move like a hammer. It moved like a hand that knew which bone to touch. The drone's arm paused. Then the weapon did something the outpost had not taught it. It moved with speed that was almost wrong. It caught the drone's cutter in a clasp of metal and force. The cutter bent. Sparks flew. The drone spun and crashed into a stack of crates. The outpost cheered. For a moment, the world felt lighter. The patrol replied with anger. It sent 2 fast boats to the sky above. Their guns painted lines across the stars. The larger ship moved into position. Its targeting arrays found the weapon in moments. The weapon felt aim like something cold. Its panel glowed with red, and then with a slow, steady blue. They fired. Warning shots turned to real hits. The air shook. A slab of the outpost water pump splintered. People dove for cover. The weapon moved. It did not fire back at first. Instead, it rose on legs or struts and took position between the patrol and the people. It shielded the yard with its bulk. Kira cried out, "It will anger them." The patrol marked the weapon as hostile. Their guns focused. A beam cut a line across the ground near the crate. The weapon answered, not with a burst of death. Instead, it launched a wide burst of force that knocked drones and small boats out of the sky. It sent a wave that threw the patrol's unmanned craft like toys. The outpost saw a power they could not have imagined. They also saw how quickly the patrol escalated. The larger ship changed tactics. It began to fire in patterns meant to test. The weapon took hits. Sparks and smoke billowed, yet it did not stop. Then a sound came from the weapon that no one had heard before. It was not a machine hum. It was a voice that carried a scrap of a human memory. Soft, like someone repeating a phrase to comfort a child. It said one name. It said Mara's name. The control room froze. Jalil's hand left the table. Mara felt as if a hand touched her shoulder. The weapon had learned faces. It had learned names. It had learned to call one. Outside, the patrol altered its line. It would not attempt a full removal. It would wait and press. The ledger had been paid. The system sought balance in blood or in law. The outpost prepared for a long night. The weapon breathed and shuddered and pulsed light. Its voice had chosen a name. That choice made Jalil proud and afraid at the same time. Above them, the warship watched like a god who keeps accounts. The patrol closed ranks. The price of the purchase was not only metal and credits. It was notice. It was enemies. It was a choice that would echo across stars. The weapons panel pulsed once more. In the bright glow, a new message flashed on their screen from the patrol. Escalation probable. Authorities en route. Mara looked at the thing that had said her name. She thought of the children. She thought of the water pump. She thought of the ledger and how a single word, "buy," had changed everything. She took a step toward the crate. The machine's light matched her footfall. The voice, half gear and half memory, said again, softly, "Protect home." The outpost held its breath. The sky above grew darker with ships. They thought they bought safety. They bought attention. They bought a future that would never be quiet again. Dawn broke hard and gray. The sky was full of ships now. The ledger patrol closed like a net. The outpost smelled of smoke and oil. Children hid. Old people sat very still. Everyone watched the yard where the weapon stood like a machine that had learned a name. Jaleel walked the fence with his hands tight on the rail. His face had small lines now. He had to make a choice that could break them or save them. Mara stood by the control room with the radio and the token that had started all this. Kira sat at the console, eyes bright with a plan that scared her more than the patrol ever could. The patrol's voice came again, very thin and very legal. Surrender asset. Arbitration in progress. Non-compliance will be met with force. Jaleel looked at the villagers. Some held tools. Some held jars of saved food. They were not soldiers. They were the kind of people who fixed pumps and remembered how to boil rainwater. Fighting a fleet would mean everything burned. "We give it up," one man said quietly. "We do not," another answered louder. The crowd split with a hot sound like tearing cloth. Old grudges flashed in human eyes. The weapon watched them all. It had learned faces. It had learned fear. Kira moved her hands over the console. She had read about arbitration in broken archives. She had read about ancient charities that could accept property in trust. If they could reassign ownership to a neutral body, if the ledger accepted it, the patrol might lose legal ground. It was a thin hope. It was a dangerous hope. "I can try," Kira said. "I can write a claim. I can pretend the buyer is an interstellar trust. The system will check. It might accept." Jaleel narrowed his eyes. "And if it fails?" "Then we still choose," she said. Her voice was small, but steady. She typed fast. Her fingers shook. She forged a signature in the ledger that read like oil on water. Interstellar Trust, Charity ID 0007. She wrapped the code in the purchase token and set out with a prayer and no certainty. The warship above them made no sound that a person could hear, but its systems moved like a slow animal. The ledger verified, cross-checked, replayed the token. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then the console chimed. Transfer request received. A string of validation ran. The ledger refused. The charter ID did not exist in their registers. The patrol's voice hardened. "Forgery detected," it said. "Attempt to manipulate trade records. This is an escalation." Panic flared at once. The patrol launched fast skiffs to surround the outpost. Their guns painted the sky. Jaleel held Mara's shoulder. The weapon under the tarp hummed. It had learned the shape of the village. It had learned the names. It had heard Kira's fingers tapping the code. In a slow way, it understood the risk. Kira watched the console and saw the patrol prepare to break the gate. She had no time left. She stood up. She took the cloth from the weapon. The metal under was scarred and strange. The weapon's small lights looked like eyes that had learned to care. For the first time, it seemed to reach back. "Mara," Kira said, voice thin, "it listens to us now. Maybe it chooses on its own." Mara did not think. She stepped forward. The crowd parted like water. The weapon's panel glowed a soft blue. Its voice, part memory, part circuit, said the one phrase it had learned for comfort. "Protect home." The patrol fired. Shots struck the yard. Metal screamed. The weapon answered not with pure killing, but with method and speed. It moved like a thing that had read people and chosen to keep them. It took hits to its plating. Sparks flew. It lifted away from between the guns and the children and moved to stand like a shield. Then it did something no one in the outpost had told it to do. The great warship above had a tether and a docking cradle. The weapon walked to the outpost's edge and then lifted itself slowly. It turned toward the sky. Old servos groaned. The weapon's core burned like a small sun. It pushed. The air filled with a sound like a drum. Mara screamed. Kira reached for the console and tried to pull it down. Jaleel felt his chest break and mend in the same breath. The weapon rose. It moved away from the outpost, away from the children in jars and the thin roofs. It climbed into the dark where the patrol waited. The patrol aimed for it. Guns followed. The weapon did not run. It went on a straight path that took heat and metal and punishment. It drew the fire away from a small world. It flew like a thing that had chosen amends. Kira's hands fell from the console. She breathed a sound so small it could have been a word. The weapon dove toward the warship that had sold it. Maybe it wanted to return. Maybe it wanted another judge. Maybe it wanted to end the trouble it had caused. It slammed into the patrol's perimeter and exploded its attention like glass. The sky lit up a net of fire. For a long hour, nothing moved under the stars. The outpost sat with empty hands. They had won and lost at the same moment. The water pump still worked. The children still slept, but now they slept with the sky full of scars. After the battle, the warship above sent a short file. Asset transfer, voided. Owner, unknown. The ledger marked the outpost as a place of interest. Calls went out across trade routes. People came to look. Some came with markets. Some came with guns. The outpost became a name. Months later, a faint signal came on the same old frequency. It was Mara's radio, tired and patched, that caught the sound. Static cleared. A human voice, older and rough with travel, spoke. This is the crew of the module called Home Guard. We left to keep you safe. We are not gone. We are out there. We bought back our future. No one knew for sure where the module had gone. Some said it had hacked the trade route law and given itself to star farms beyond the Ledger Patrol's reach. Others said it had died in the black, with its last light of warning. The truth did not matter in the way that mattered. The people of the outpost had something stronger than silence now. They had a story. They had the proof that a small world could be heard. They had the knowledge that even a mistake can make humans brave. Mara stood on the roof and watched the stars. Jaleel fixed a pipe that had cracked in the fight. Kira read old books and wrote new lines in brittle hand. The galaxy had noticed them. The price of the purchase had been high, but the outpost still stood. It was scarred. It was famous. It was alive. And somewhere far in the dark, a machine kept a promise. It had learned from human voices. Protect home.